10 years after our divorce, my ex-wife stood up at our school reunion and told 400 people I'd never finished anything in my life. But she didn't know the man she was mocking had become a billionaire 18 months earlier. My name is Harlan Voss, 41 years old. Ohio plates, 2011 F-150 with a cracked mirror I never bothered to fix. Boots that still smell like somebody's crawl space. When Doyle Fenn asked me what I did for a living, I said what I've said for 20 years. Heating and cooling. And I watched his face do that thing. That little slip. The pity? Her name is June. June Calloway now. She took the second husband's name, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't notice. 10 years ago she signed the divorce papers at a kitchen table I built with my own hands, and I signed them 2 days later, because I thought she was right about me. I thought everybody was right about me. So when she picked up that drink and started in, I married a man with a notebook full of miracles and a truck full of duct tape. The room laughed. When she said I was going to change the world with a shoebox, they laughed harder. And when she looked me dead in the eye across a gymnasium that still smelled like the same floor wax from high school and said, 10 years, and the only thing that man ever finished was the divorce papers, I didn't correct her. Not because I couldn't. My company employs 11,000 people in 9 countries. My name isn't on a single one of those buildings, but my wife's handwriting is on every last one of them. 12 years now, stenciled on the wall of every facility I own, and she has never once seen it. I could have ended her in one sentence, but I stood there in a cheap jacket and let her have it, because correcting June Calloway would have meant saying a name out loud in a room full of drunk people, and that name has cost me enough. So I said, "It went fine," and I walked out. That's when I saw her in the parking lot, scraping the reunion buffet into Tupperware. Not for a party, and her car wouldn't start. Here's what I need you to understand before we go any further. Why would a billionaire let his ex-wife humiliate him in front of the whole town and say nothing? Whose name was I protecting 10 years after the divorce that mattered more than my own? Why was the woman who mocked me for being broke stealing cold food off a school reunion table? And what did June Calloway write in my notebook in 2013? The one line I've kept on my wall for 12 years that she's about to find out is worth $4 billion. Let me back up 11 minutes. Quarry Bend, Ohio. Population 9,000 and falling. We've got a river that runs brown after rain, a water tower with our mascot painted on it, and a valve plant that shut its gates in 2016 and took 600 jobs down the drain with it. You can still see it from the high school parking lot. Big and dark and quiet, like a whale that washed up, and nobody wanted to move. I sat in my truck in that parking lot for 20 minutes before I went inside. Engine off, heater ticking as it cooled. I told myself I was letting a song finish. I was not letting a song finish. I want to be honest with you, because if I'm not honest with you at the start, none of the rest of this will land right. I did not come back to Quarry Bend for a reunion. I hate reunions. I came back because my company had just bought that dead valve plant through a shell corporation with a boring name, and I was going to be in this town for a year. And I could not stand in that town for a year without knowing one thing: whether June Voss had ever forgiven me. That's it. That's the whole reason. $4 billion, and I drove 300 miles to find out if one woman still hated me. The gym smelled exactly the same. That's the thing that got me first. Floor wax and old rubber and somebody's cologne trying too hard. They'd hung a banner over the free throw line. Class of 2006. 20 years. Somebody had run out of room and squeezed the exclamation point in sideways. Doyle Fenn found me before I got 10 feet in. Doyle sells insurance now. Doyle sold insurance at 19. Spiritually. Voss. Harlan Voss. He shook my hand with both of his, the way men do when they want you to know they've grown. "Man, look at you. What are you doing these days?" "Heating and cooling," I said. And there it was. That flicker across his face. That soft little collapse around the eyes. He said, "Hey, that's honest work," and squeezed my shoulder. And I have never in my life wanted to hit a man less or more at the same time. Because here's the thing, I do heating and cooling. That's not a lie. That has never once been a lie. I saw her across the room 40 seconds later. I'd like to tell you something dramatic happened in my chest. It didn't. It was quieter than that, and worse. It was the feeling you get walking into your own house after a long trip, when everything's where you left it, and you didn't realize until right then how tired you were. 10 years. Her hair was shorter. She had a laugh going, big and bright, and 3 women around her leaning in. And I knew inside of 6 seconds that she was in trouble. I've fixed 40,000 furnaces in my life, give or take. I can tell you the exact moment a pilot light's about to go out just by the color of it. It goes thin, it goes blue and tall, and it dances, looks brighter, almost, right at the end. People think that means it's fine. June was dancing. Her drink was full, and she wasn't drinking it. She was holding it, high, like a shield. Her laugh came a half-second early on every joke, and her eyes kept cutting to the door. I know that woman. I know her better than I know my own hands, and every alarm I have was screaming that she was one wrong question away from going out. I should have walked the other way. Instead, I stood there like an idiot, and somebody said, "June, look who's here," and she turned, and I watched it hit her. There was a half-second, I swear to you on everything, half a second, where her face just opened. No armor, nothing. 10 years fell off her, and she looked 21, and she looked at me like I was a door back into a room she'd been locked out of. And then somebody behind her said the words that ended it. They said, "Hey, you two were married, right? Didn't you guys have a—" And I saw June Calloway make a decision. I've thought about that half-second every day since. Because what I know now, what I didn't know then, is that she had about 2 seconds to stop that sentence before it got to the word baby, in a gym with 400 people, and a lawyer's assistant standing 11 feet away with a phone in her pocket. So she picked up the only weapon in reach. Me. "Oh, we were married," she said, loud, and she turned to the whole circle with her drink up like a torch. "Ladies, let me tell you about Harlan Voss." And the circle got bigger. That's what happens. It always gets bigger. I married a man with a notebook full of miracles and a truck full of duct tape. Laugh. Small one. 22 years old. This man is going to change the world. He's got a shoebox, an actual shoebox, with wires coming out of it in my kitchen, on my table, for 11 months. She turned, working them now, and she was good. June was always good. She could make a parking ticket funny. "Everybody, ask him how that went. Go on. Ask him how the shoebox is doing." Somebody said, "How's the shoebox, Harlan?" And the room broke. And I stood there. I need you to understand what was in my pocket right then. My phone. In my phone was a message from Adele Pryor, the woman the world thinks runs my company, asking me to approve a purchase order for 1,100 ceramic cores. Cores. Shoeboxes. That's what we call them on the floor. Shoeboxes. Every one of those 1,100 was going into a house like the one I grew up in. 100-year-old bones, plaster walls, a furnace from the Eisenhower administration, and it was going to cut somebody's heating bill by 60%. Last winter our units kept the heat on in about 400,000 American homes that couldn't have afforded it otherwise. The shoebox is doing fine. The shoebox is doing about $4 billion. And I said nothing. I just stood there in a jacket I bought at a Kohl's in 2019 and let it wash over me. And part of me, I'm not proud of this, part of me was almost enjoying it. Because she was still funny. Because she was still her. Because a man who has been alone for 10 years will take being laughed at over being nothing. And I hate that about myself. But there it is. And then she went too far. She looked right at me, not at the room, at me. And the joke went out of her voice, and something else came in. Something tired and mean and old. And she said, 10 years. And the only thing that man ever finished was the divorce papers. Nobody laughed at that one. That's the part people forget. The room laughed at the shoebox. The room did not laugh at that. Because there's a line where funny stops and something ugly starts, and everybody in that gym heard her cross it, and the silence afterward had a shape to it. And I looked at her, and I knew. I could have ended it right there. One sentence. 8 words. "June, who do you think bought the valve plant?" And I'd have watched every face in that gym rearrange itself, and Doyle Fenn would have spent the rest of his life telling that story at parties. But here's what stopped me. To correct her, I'd have had to explain the notebook. To explain the notebook, I'd have had to explain what's written on the wall of every building I own. And to explain that, I'd have had to say a name out loud. in a gymnasium, to 400 people holding plastic cups. And I have never said that name out loud in public. Not once in 12 years. That name is the only thing I have left that hasn't been touched by anybody. And I was not going to spend it to win an argument. So I looked at my ex-wife, and I said the only true thing I could afford. It went fine. And I walked out. The night hit me like a bucket of water. October in Ohio. That cold that smells like wet leaves and somebody's wood stove 3 streets over. My ears were ringing. I made it to my truck and put both hands on the hood and just breathed. And that's when I saw her. Not June. A shape. At the side door. By the dumpsters. Where the light doesn't reach. Somebody moving fast. Somebody who didn't want to be seen. I watched her come out with a foil tray from the buffet table, and I watched her crouch down beside a Corolla with a taped-up taillight, and I watched June Calloway scrape cold ziti into Tupperware with a plastic fork. She had 4 containers. 4. She was stacking them like she'd done it before. And the woman who had just told 400 people I was a joke, she stopped, halfway through, and looked around the parking lot to make sure nobody saw her. I ducked. I actually ducked. Behind my own truck, like a thief. Because I understood. You don't do a bit like the one she just did because you're happy. You don't hold a full drink for an hour, like a shield, because you're doing great. You do it because you are starving and you cannot let one single person in that building find out. She got in the car. She turned the key. Nen, click. She tried it again. Nothing. She tried it 11 more times. I counted every one from behind my truck, and each one got sadder than the last. And then she stopped, and she put her forehead on the steering wheel. She didn't cry loud. June never cries loud. Her shoulders just went, once, twice, like something dropping downstairs. Then she sat up, wiped her face with the heel of her hand, put on the exact same smile she'd worn inside, and walked back into that gym to ask somebody for a jump like it was nothing, like it was funny. I bet she made a joke about it. I bet they laughed. I gave her 10 seconds. Then I popped her hood. Battery terminal. Corroded to hell. Green crust like moss. And the clamp was loose enough to wobble. That car hadn't been getting a full connection in months. She'd been driving on luck. I had a wire brush in my toolbox because I always have a wire brush in my toolbox. 4 minutes. Scrubbed it clean, dressed it, tightened the clamp, wiped my hands on my jeans. 4 minutes to fix. And I want you to sit with that, because it's the whole story. 10 years apart. A gym full of people laughing at me. And the second, I saw something of hers that was broken. My hands were already moving before my brain got a vote. That's not nobility. Don't give me that. That's a disease. I closed her hood soft so it wouldn't bang. I got in my truck and I drove away before she came back out, and I never told her, and she has no idea to this day. That's what I thought anyway. I want to tell you about the notebook now, because you've waited long enough, and because everything from here breaks on it. We'd been married 2 years. We had a rental on Tallow Street with a furnace that made a sound like a man clearing his throat and windows so bad you could watch the curtains breathe. Some nights that house got so cold, June would sleep in my coat. And I had this idea. Not a good one yet. Just a shape. A ceramic core, honeycombed, that would grab the heat going out the flue and hand it back to the air coming in. Old houses. Poor houses. Houses like ours. Cut the bill in half without ripping out a single wall. I couldn't explain it. I'm not a talker. I put it in a notebook. A $1.19 composition book. Pages and pages of it. And one night, I finally worked up the nerve to show her. And I braced for her to be kind. June looked at it for a long time. And then she picked up my pen, and she wrote one line at the top of the page, in her big loopy handwriting that goes uphill on the right. Warm rooms for cold people. And she said, "There. That's what it is. Now you don't have to explain it anymore. That's the whole thing, Harlan. That's it." She was right. It was the whole thing. I'd been trying to explain heat exchange to people for a year, and this woman fixed it in 4 words in 3 seconds. I built that company on her sentence. Not on my math. My math was slow. My math took 9 more years. On her sentence. It's the first thing I say in a room. It's what I told the first investor who ever gave me $1. It's stenciled on the wall inside the main door of every Renline facility on this earth. 11,000 people walk past my ex-wife's handwriting every morning, and not one of them knows whose it is. And I never told her. Now here's the part that costs me something. The next year, everything went wrong at once. And I'll get to it. And when I do, you're going to understand everything. But the short version is that after it went wrong, June looked at that notebook like it was a snake. She'd find me at the kitchen table at 3 in the morning, drawing honeycomb patterns, and she'd stand in the doorway and just look at me. And one night she said, quiet, not even angry, "Harlan, let it go. It's a shoebox. Please, I'm begging you, let it go and come back." And 2 months later, she was gone. So when she stood up in that gym and said, "Ask him how the shoebox went," she wasn't just being cruel. She was quoting herself. Now, the reunion was Saturday. Monday morning, I met a man named Elias Trott in the county building to sign the last of the paperwork on the valve plant. And I made him keep my name off of it one more time. And he told me I was being ridiculous. And he was right. Tuesday, I saw her again. Not on purpose. Hillcrest Elementary, 315, pickup line, because Renline was donating the retrofit on that school's boiler, and I'd gone to look at the ductwork myself like I always do. I came around the corner of the building with a flashlight in my hand, and there she was on the sidewalk, and next to her was a kid. 9, maybe. Freckles like somebody flicked a paintbrush at her. Backpack bigger than her whole body. And she had June's hand in both of hers, and she was swinging it and talking a mile a minute. And June was looking down at her like she was the only warm thing in Ohio. And the kid looked up at me and said, "Are you the boiler guy?" I said, "I'm the boiler guy." She said, "My bike's chain came off. Are you good at chains too?" And June said, "Posey," in that voice, that mortified mother voice. And I said, "I'm decent at chains." 2 minutes later, I'm on the sidewalk of an elementary school, in a good jacket for once. Black grease up to my wrist, and this kid is standing over me narrating my own repair back to me. And June Calloway is standing 3 feet away with her arms crossed, not saying one word. I got the chain on. I spun the crank. Posey hollered like I'd cured something. And then she said the thing that took the floor out from under me. She said, "You should come for dinner. Mom's a bad cook, but I like company." And June said, "Fast. Too fast. Posey, honey, go get in the car." The kid went, and it was just the two of us on that sidewalk. And June wouldn't look at me, and I watched her jaw work. Finally, she said, "About Saturday. Don't, Harlan, June. It's fine." And she said, and I swear her voice cracked right down the middle, "It's not fine. I know exactly what I did." And then she got in that Corolla, and she turned the key, and it started first try, and she stopped, dead still. Both hands on the wheel, she looked at the hood, then she looked up at me through the windshield with an expression I have not been able to get out of my head since, and she drove away. Here's what I didn't know standing on that sidewalk. I didn't know that little girl wasn't June's daughter. Not legally. Not by blood. Not by one single piece of paper anywhere in the state of Ohio. I didn't know a woman named Adeline Cruz had filed in county court 11 weeks earlier, and that a judge was going to look at June's income, June's housing, and June's stability, and decide whether she'd ever see that kid again. I didn't know that's why she couldn't afford, literally, could not afford, to look poor in front of that town for 1 second. She looked poor in public, so she made someone else look poorer. And I didn't know that on Thursday morning, a reporter at the county paper was going to pull the filings on a shell company and put a name on the front page above the fold, and that at 6:04 a.m., June Calloway was going to pick that paper up off her porch in her bare feet and read 4 letters that would take her legs out from under her. W-R-E-N. Renline. Because that's the name I gave it. And there's only one other person alive who knows why. She read that name at 6:04 in the morning, and by 6:20 my phone was ringing, and I let it ring. Not because I didn't want to talk to her, because I did, because I'd wanted to for 10 years, and I knew that the second I picked up, I'd have to say the thing, and I wasn't ready, and I have never in my life been ready. She called 4 times. Then she stopped. At midnight she knocked on the door of room 14 at the Benview Motel, and I opened it, and she was standing there in the parking lot light, with the newspaper in her fist, and her hair wet from the rain, and her mouth already shaking. She didn't say hello. She said one word, "Ren." And 10 years came down like a wall. I want to tell you about 2014 now. I've put it off long enough. You've been patient with me, and you deserve the truth. So here it is. All of it. And I'm only going to say it once. June was pregnant. 36 weeks. We had a name picked before we had a crib, because we were broke, and names are free. Wren. Her idea. She said it was a bird small enough to fit in your hand that could still make more noise than anything else in the yard. And she said, "That's our kid. That's exactly our kid." She painted the closet door of that awful rental with chalkboard paint, and every week she'd write the number. 6 weeks. 5 weeks. 4. On a Tuesday in March, she said the baby hadn't moved since the night before. I told her it was fine. I want you to hear that. I told my wife it was fine, and I drove her to the hospital doing 40 in a 35 because I didn't want to scare her by going faster. There was a room. There was a screen. There was a young woman with a wand and gel, and she went very quiet, and then she said she was going to get somebody, and she left the door open about 4 inches, and June and I sat in that room and listened to the sound of a hallway. Our daughter was born at 4:51 in the afternoon, and she never took a breath. They let us have 4 hours. 4 hours. That's what we got. That's the entire life of our family, start to finish. 4 hours in a room on the 3rd floor, with the blinds half open and the radiator clicking. And here's the part I told a courtroom 2 months ago, and here's the part I never told June, because I didn't have the words then, and I didn't have them for 10 years after. That woman was a mother for 4 hours, and she was the best one I have ever seen. She held her. She held her the whole time. She never once put her down. Not to drink water, not to sleep. Not when the nurses came. Not when her own hands went numb. She hummed to her. She told her about the house. She told her about the dog we were going to get. She apologized to her. God, she apologized to her, over and over, for something that was never once her fault. And she counted her fingers out loud. All 10 of them. Twice. Like she was memorizing. And when they finally had to take her, June kissed her forehead and said, "Okay, okay. Go on then, little bird." And she let go. I have watched 11,000 people work for me. I have sat across from men who move billions of dollars with a phone call. I have never seen anybody do anything as brave as what my wife did in that room. And I couldn't say it. Not then. Not for 1 second of the 8 months that came after. Because I broke. That's the truth. I broke in a way nobody could see, which is the worst way to break. I got up and went to work, and fixed people's furnaces, and came home and ate dinner, and said I'm fine. So many times the words stopped being English. And at night, when the house was dark and I couldn't lie in that bed one more minute, I'd go sit at the kitchen table, and I'd draw. Honeycombs, cores, airflow arrows, page after page after page, 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, this stupid ceramic shoebox, over and over and over. And June would stand in that doorway in my coat and watch me. And here is what she saw. I need you to see it the way she saw it. Because if you don't, you'll hate her. And she doesn't deserve that. She saw a man whose daughter had just died, sitting at a table, calm as a Sunday, drawing. She saw him go back to his hobby. She saw the one person on earth who was supposed to be as destroyed as she was, and he looked fine, and she could not understand how a man could bury his baby and then go tinker with a box. She thought I'd moved on. She thought I'd forgotten her. And every night I sat at that table, I was pouring my daughter into that notebook because it was the only container I had that didn't have June's face on it. Every honeycomb was a scream. Every single one. I couldn't put it on my wife. She was carrying enough. She was carrying all of it. So I put it in the box. She asked me to let it go. She begged me. She stood in that doorway and said, "It's a shoebox. Please, come back." And what she meant was, "Come grieve with me. I am so alone in here." And what I heard was, "The only thing keeping you alive is stupid." And I didn't say a word. I just closed the notebook and went to bed and lay there next to her, 4 inches away. And we were both drowning in the same bed, and neither of us knew the other one was in the water. 8 months later she left. She signed at that kitchen table. I signed 2 days later. And people have said to me, the 2 or 3 people who know, they say, "Harlan, you signed in 2 days? You didn't even fight?" I didn't fight because I thought she was right. I thought I was the man who couldn't finish anything. I thought I'd failed the only test that ever mattered. I couldn't keep one room warm, one small room, 4 hours long, and if she said I was a man with a notebook full of nothing, well, who was I to argue with the only person who'd ever seen the whole thing? So I let her go, and I named the company after our daughter, and I put my wife's handwriting on the wall, and I built the entire thing as a headstone I could keep working on. And I never told a soul. That's what she was holding in that newspaper. She stood in room 14 with rain in her hair, and she looked at me and she said, "Ren." And I said, "Yeah." And she said, very carefully, like she was walking on a frozen pond, "Harlan, why is our daughter's name on $4 billion? So I told her. I told her standing up, and then sitting on the end of a motel bed, and then finally with my head in my hands, and it came out of me in pieces, and it was ugly, and I couldn't do it in order. And I said the sentence I'd needed to say for 11 years. I wasn't drawing because I was over it. I was drawing because it was the only place I could put her. June made a sound I hope I never hear again. She went down. Right there on the carpet of a motel room, and I got down with her. And she grabbed 2 fistfuls of my shirt, and she said, "You let me think." And she couldn't finish it. She tried 3 times. "You let me think you didn't care." "I know. I asked you to let it go." And Harlan, I told you to let her go, and I didn't know that's what I was saying. I know, June. I know. And we sat on that floor, 2 41-year-olds with the rain coming down outside, and we finally, 10 years late, cried about our daughter at the same time. Nobody kissed anybody. I want to be real clear about that. Nothing like that happened, and nothing like that could have happened. It was better than that. Around 2 in the morning, she said, "Every building, every one, right inside the main door. My handwriting, yours, the real page. We scan it." And June Calloway laughed, wrecked, wet, hiccuping, and said, "I wrote that in 11 seconds. I know. I wrote it because you were doing that thing where you explained something for 40 minutes. I know." And she put her face in her hands and said, into her palms, so quiet I barely got it. "And on Saturday, I stood up in a gym and made 400 people laugh at it." And then she told me about Posey. Rory Calloway. Died 2 years ago. Aneurysm, 43 years old. At a stoplight. Left behind a 6-year-old girl. June had been raising since she was 3. Left behind no will. Left behind a mother, Adeline Cruz, with a big house in Worcester, and a grief so big, it needed somewhere to go. And Adeline had filed, 11 weeks ago, grandparent custody, because June had lost her hours, and June's apartment had black mold in the bathroom, and June had $211 in her checking account, and the state of Ohio has never once heard of June Voss Calloway as anybody's mother. No blood, no paperwork, nothing. 9 years, and nothing. And a hearing on the 12th of December. "That's why," I said. She nodded. "That's why you couldn't let anybody in that gym see. There was a woman there, taking notes for their lawyer," she said, 11 feet away from me. And Denise Hopper opened her mouth, and I could see the word coming, Harlan. I could see the shape of it. And if she'd said the word baby, I was going to come apart in front of the entire town, and it was going to end up in a filing. She looked up at me. Her eyes were destroyed. "So I hit you," she said, "because you were the only thing in that room I knew would take it." And that right there, that sentence, is the truest thing anybody has ever said to me. Because she was right. I would take it. I would take it forever. That's what I was for. Now here's where I ruin it. I want you to watch me do this. Because I've had a long time to think about it, and I still can't believe how fast I got it wrong. I fixed things. That's what I did. That's all I did. By Friday, I had a custody firm out of Columbus, with a name like a law school on retainer, at $900 an hour. By Monday, I had bought her landlord's building. The whole building, 6 units, cash, and had a crew in there tearing out the mold. By Tuesday, I had a house picked out. 3 bedrooms, yard, good district. I did all of it in 8 days, and I did all of it without asking her once. And on a Thursday night, I stood on her porch with the cold coming off the river, and I said the thing I'd been rehearsing in my truck for an hour. I said, "Marry me." She went absolutely still. I said, "Look, The court wants stability. Housing, income, a family. That's the whole checklist. If we're married, the judge sees a house. He sees money. He sees two parents. Adeline Cruz walks in there, and she's got nothing. June, it's solved. I can solve it. Let me solve it. And my ex-wife looked at me on that porch for a long, long time, and she said, "You're doing it again." I said, "What?" And she said, and her voice was so kind. That's what killed me. She wasn't even angry. "You're not loving me, Harlan. You're solving me." I said her name. She said, "That's what you did in 2014. Something broke and you went and built a box. And I stood in that doorway for 8 months waiting for you to just come sit with me. Not fix it. You couldn't fix it. Nobody could fix it. Just sit with me in it. And you couldn't. So you built. And now our whole life is on fire again, and you're standing on my porch with a checklist and a ring." She put her hand on the door. "I'm not a furnace," she said. "You can't come at 3 in the morning and get me running again and go home." I said, "Then what am I supposed to do?" And June Calloway said the 11 words that changed my entire life. "I don't know, but I need you to be there when you don't know." And she fired every lawyer I hired. She called them herself. That night, one by one. She sent back the house. She let me keep the mold crew, because she's not stupid. But she wrote me a check for $1,100 out of an account with $200 in it. And she made me take it, and I have never cashed it and I never will. It was the worst month of my life, and she was completely, entirely right. The tax abatement hearing was the second week of December, town hall, and they held it in the gym. Same floor wax, same folding chairs. I swear they didn't even move them. They just took the banner down. 600 jobs on the table, and half of Quarry Bend crammed in there in winter coats, and up front, me, in the same cheap jacket, because Renline was buying the valve plant, and now everybody in that room knew whose money it was. And in the fourth row, with a legal pad, sat a man from Adeline Cruz's firm. June knew he was there. She saw him walk in, and I want you to understand the math in front of her, because it was simple and it was brutal. Her hearing was in 6 days. The safe play, the right play, the one that protects that little girl, was to sit in that gym and be nobody. Be quiet. Be unconnected to the strange rich man buying the town. Give that lawyer nothing. They opened the floor for public comment, and June Calloway stood up. I turned around and my heart went through the floor. She walked to the little microphone on the stand in the middle of that gym, and she looked at the floor for about 4 seconds, and then she looked up, and she found my face, and she started. "Most of you were in this room in October," she said. "The gym went so quiet you could hear the heat kick on. 20-year reunion. Some of you laughed. That's not your fault. I'm funny. A couple people made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. I stood right about there. And I told all of you that Harlan Voss was a man with a notebook full of miracles and a truck full of duct tape. And I told you to ask him how the shoebox went." She swallowed. "It wasn't duct tape," she said. "It was grief. I couldn't breathe. In 2014, Harlan and I had a daughter. Her name was Ren. She lived 4 hours, and she never opened her eyes, and I have not said her name in public one time in 12 years, because I was afraid of what would come out of me if I did." The lawyer in the fourth row started writing. She kept going. "And after, my husband would sit at our kitchen table at 3 in the morning, drawing a box. And I thought it meant he'd forgotten her." Her voice went. She stopped. She waited. Nobody moved. It didn't. It meant she was the only thing he was made of. And I told him to let it go. I looked at the only man on earth who was carrying my daughter, and I told him to put her down, and then I left him for doing what I asked. She looked around that gym. In 2013, I picked up his pen, and I wrote 4 words at the top of his notebook, because he couldn't explain what he was making. Warm rooms for cold people. That's it, that's the whole thing. And I want you all to know, and here she started to break, and she pushed through it. That sentence is painted on the wall of every building that man owns. In 9 countries, for 12 years, in my handwriting, and he never told me, because he didn't want anything back. She turned and looked at the man in the fourth row. Right at him. Made sure he had it. "There's a lawyer here writing all this down for a custody case against me on Friday," she said, clear as a bell. "Sir, I'll spell the names for you if you need." And then she said the last thing. "I'm not up here for the plant. I don't care about the plant. I'm up here because I stood in this room and made 400 people laugh at the best man I have ever known, and I'm not going to be a coward in the same room twice. 600 people. Nobody clapped. It wasn't a clapping thing. She just walked back to her seat. Friday. Courtroom 2B, Wayne County. I testified. Not about money. I'd already pulled every dollar, every lawyer, every string. She'd made me. And she was right. And I showed up in that courtroom with exactly nothing in my hands. They asked me what I was there to say. And I said, I'm the only living witness to 4 hours in a hospital room in March of 2014. And I told them. I told a judge and a court reporter and a room full of strangers about a young woman who held her daughter for 4 hours and never put her down. Who hummed, who counted her fingers twice, who apologized to a baby for something that was never her fault, who kissed her forehead at the end and said, "Okay, go on then, little bird." And I said, "Your Honor, the state's got no paper on June Calloway. I understand that. But I've watched that woman be a mother for 4 hours with nothing. No chance, no future, no hope, nothing coming. And she did it perfectly. She's had 9 years with Posey and a fighting chance. Ask yourself what she did with that." I said her name in public. Ren Voss. Out loud in a courtroom, 12 years late. It didn't cost me anything. That's the thing nobody tells you. It didn't cost me one single thing. And then I did the part I'm actually proud of. I went out in the hall, and I sat down next to Adeline Cruz, 68 years old. Good coat, her purse on her lap with both hands on it. She looked at me like I was the enemy, and I was. And I said, "Mrs. Cruz, I'm not here to beat you." She didn't say anything. I said, "You lost your son at a stoplight, and nobody asked you if that was okay. And now the only piece of him left calls somebody else mom. And I don't think you want to take that little girl away from June. I think you're terrified that when Posey grows up there won't be one person left in her life who says Rory's name out loud." And this woman, this proud, put-together woman, made a sound in a courthouse hallway. And I said, "I know exactly what that's like. I've got a daughter nobody's said the name of in 12 years. I know what that does to a person. It'll eat you." And Adeline Cruz said, "I just wanted Sundays." She withdrew the petition that afternoon. She gets Sundays. Every one. She's had every Sunday for 7 months. And she brings that child a photo album of a boy at a lake. And Posey knows her father's laugh now. Second hand. And that's not nothing. That is not nothing. Spring. Same porch. River cold. Posey inside doing something loud. I stood there, and I didn't have a checklist. I didn't have a house or a firm or a plan. I had nothing in my hands, and my heart was going like a bird in a box. And I said, "Marry me." June said, "What's the rest of it?" I said, "There's no rest of it." And she looked at me, and I said, "June, I can't fix it. I never could. That's the thing I've spent 12 years and $4 billion learning. Some things you don't fix. You just carry them. And you carried her by yourself for 10 years, and I carried her by myself for 10 years. And I'm so tired." I said, "I'd just like to carry it with you." She was crying before I finished. She said yes on a porch in Ohio in the rain, in a coat that used to be mine. Opening day at the plant was in October, a year to the week from that reunion. 600 jobs. That whole town came out. Doyle Fenn was there. Everybody was there. Big blue sheet over the sign at the gate, and some kid from the paper with a camera, and a rope. And they let Posey pull it. The sheet came down, Ren line, and underneath, 6 feet tall, taken straight off a page of a $1.19 composition book, every wobble in it, the way it goes uphill on the right. Warm rooms for cold people. June put her hand over her mouth. And Posey, 9 years old, squinting up at that sign with her whole face scrunched, said the thing that opened the last door in my chest. "Who's Ren?" And I watched my wife get down on one knee on the gravel of a parking lot in Quarry Bend, Ohio, and take that little girl by both hands. And she didn't flinch, not for a second. She said, "Ren was your sister. Come here, let me tell you about her." And she did, out loud, in public, 12 years late, in front of 600 people and a town and a sign and a man who'd waited his whole life to hear it. That's the story. That's all of it. 10 years after our divorce, my ex-wife mocked me at our school reunion, and she never found out I was a billionaire. Not from me. She found out from a newspaper on a porch in her bare feet. And it didn't matter, because the money never fixed a single thing. Not one. The money bought a plant, and a sign, and a whole lot of nothing. What fixed it was a woman standing up in the same room where she broke me, and unsaying it, when it cost her everything to do it. And a man who finally learned that the bravest thing you can do isn't build somebody a warmer room. It's sitting down in the cold one, and staying. So let me leave you with this, and I want you to actually sit with it, not just scroll past it. Is there somebody in your life you decided was cold, when the truth is, they were just grieving in a language you never learned to speak? Because I lost 10 years to that. 10 years, and she was 4 inches away the whole time. If this story moved you, do me one favor, hit that subscribe button, and turn on the notification bell if you haven't already, so the next one finds you. Somebody out there needs to hear it. It might be you.